Hello, this is Tommy Stella, writer of The Days and Mustn't Tell, and you are listening to the Oblivion Bar podcast.
Welcome to the Oblivion Bar podcast with your host, Chris Hacker and Aaron Knowles.
Joining us this week on the show is the writer of The Days, Contact, Self-Destruct, Home, The End, and the more recent indie all-ages horror series Mustn't Tell. It is my pleasure to welcome my friend Tommy Stella onto the Oblivion Bar podcast.
Hello, everyone's clapping. We'll see if that
You hear the clapping, the round of applause. There it is.
There's so many claps. That'll just sound like chaos in the final edit. Hello.
Hello, welcome Tommy. Thank you so much for being here today on the Oblivion Bar.
I realized that me mainly writing one-shot comics means that my introduction sounds so much more impressive than it really is. It sounded like so many things. Each one's one issue, but they're good. But yeah, no, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no, not a problem. You can't expose yourself that early on in the episode. You should just let everyone believe that those were like full-fledged series and all that.
They all won several Eisners each. Every possible category you could think of, each one won several.
Yeah.
And
everyone listening right now, you can't see it, but there's just like lines of Eisners and Harvey Awards behind Tommy right now.
Yeah, the shelf's always falling over because they're actually very heavy. I've held so many of them all in my arms.
You got to find the stud in the wall, Tommy. That's the trick. That's where you get the anchor.
I'm too busy writing Eisner winning
I
comics.
can't do that. I literally can't hang shelves. I'm too busy writing Eisner winning series.
There's no time to do it. Put down, once you pick up a stud finder, you put down the pen.
That's right.
That's what Stan Lee said.
Was that T.S. Eliot that you just
No,
quoted there?
No. That was me actually.
That was you.
Said that. Yeah.
Tommy Stella.
Just one. Yeah.
Well, Tommy, once again, thank you so much for being here. It is absolutely a pleasure. We've been trying to do this for a long time, and I think it would be fun to kind of start off the conversation talking about how we kind of know each other, because I think our introduction was when you had a show. It was you, Mandy, and Alana. You guys had was it like a Gem Mint? What was the name of the show? Tell the people about how we first met.
Yeah. So some background. I used to do it wasn't quite a podcast. It was more of like a resource.
A book club?
Well, we met through the book club, but we created this website and like newsletter that the idea was, how do we help people get into comics that maybe have no idea what's going on with that? And it's not like that's the only one to ever do that, but we wanted to make it as beginner friendly as possible, open up the gates that people have been gatekeeping. Here's a bunch of resources. Here's how everything works. Here's like interviews and all that. And then eventually we did a book club where the idea was that we would read like a trade, like a volume 1 of a trade or like a complete if it's short, and then discuss it every week in a way that was as inviting as possible. So, we wanted to get people sitting down, like picking up a comic for the first time and just having a spot where they can like live chat and be like, "Ooh, I like this about it. I like that about it. Like, what do you recommend?" and all that. And that's how we met Chris.
Yeah.
I forget how you ended up on it.
I think it was Mandy, perhaps.
Probably Mandy,
Yeah.
But you were on it. My girlfriend always said, because she watched every single one, that you were like our best guest.
Aw.
Because you were just really talkative the whole time. And I remember back then I did not have a good microphone set up. I still don't. But back then I did not at all. So I couldn't really chime in on, like, if there was a conversation happening already, I couldn't like say anything or also just like and like cut everyone off.
Yep.
So I'd be really quiet the whole time.
Do you remember what we talked about?
It was a book you picked because that's how we ran things.
Yep.
God, what was it?
It was a Batman book.
Was it Batman Universe? Is that what it's called?
No, that's a good guess. I do love Batman Universe by Brian Michael Bendis and Nick Darrington, but it was actually Batman Ego by Darwin Cook.
That is also a good one.
Yeah, that's my all-time favorite Batman story. And anytime I tell people that, they're like, Batman Ego? I don't think I've even heard of that. So everyone listening right now, from Tommy and I and Mandy and Alana, make sure you guys go read Batman Ego. It's kind of like a one-shot itself. It's like 40 pages. It's not really that long of a story. So it's an incredible book. But we're not here to talk about Batman Ego. We're here to talk about Tommy Stella and his work. So Tommy, let's talk about Mustn't Tell, which is your brand new Kickstarter series. It's an all-age horror comic that you just recently put up on Kickstarter. It is the art is by B.A. Roth and
John McDaniel.
I knew it was McDaniel, but I was trying to remember his first name without looking it up. But
yes. So just to clarify a little bit, when the art is drawn by them, we have a really weird specific system in place that I thought of like 2 years ago that's been lingering in my mind, which is so the art, like 90% of it is done by John McDaniel.
Mhm.
He has like a very like cartoonish, like Disney-esque style. And then the rest of it is done by B.A. Roth. It's like both with an R.
Mhm.
And he's what we say haunting the book, which means that it's a scary horror book and there's a monster in it. So BA is drawing just the monster and some fear effects is what we call them, with John doing everything else.
Sure.
So basically, John does the comic, then BA comes in and just like messes the whole thing up in like a beautiful, horrific kind of way.
And you've worked with BA before on the days, correct?
Yes, yeah, we met through of all places the admin of the Wikipedia Twitter account. His name's Jordan. He's the best. He was like, yeah, I got this. There's an artist that I know that used to be an editor on Wikipedia. Like, you guys should chat. And at the time, I was like, oh, well, like, they probably did like fan art, which isn't quite the same as comic art. So, like, I'm not sure if that'll be the best fit because that's just kind of how it works. But then I saw some of his stuff and I was like, oh, this is really good. And then I learned that the stuff that I had seen was already like a couple years old, I think, at that point. So then when he sent me like the first page that he did of our thing, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's really good. So it was just fell in my lap. It was wonderful.
I will say too, I love how you've kind of combined two forces here with these two different, very specific art styles between McDaniel and Roth. And Roth, anytime that you see this figure, and I want to get into the actual story here in just a moment, and kind of like the lead up to this premiere on Kickstarter and kind of this whole campaign as a whole. But like, I will say, just reading the first issue myself, jarring is not the correct word, I don't think, but it is at a contrast to the story. Whereas you, again, like you said, kind of had this like Disney-esque, very YA type of, creative force that McDaniel is bringing. And then anytime we see this creature, which we don't really know what this is quite yet, and I'm sure we'll talk about it during this conversation, Roth brings in this very specific art style that is, again, very haunting.
The whole idea kind of stemmed from a very, very specific childhood fear that I have, where now that I've like put it out into the world, I realize it's not as universal as I thought it was, but it works in this situation, which is anytime a cartoon or like a TV show that was like not exactly live action, but anytime like it changed the art style, so like a character or a moment was in a different format. So like the most known example, but it's not the scariest, is like SpongeBob, that one episode where they had the gorilla come in. That was like a live action person in a gorilla suit. When I was a kid, that freaked me out. Courage the Cowardly Dog had a lot of things like that. There was a TV show called Kablam, which you might know because it was like kind of comic adjacent. They did that all the time, and it always freaked me out because I just didn't like the out of place kind of look to it. Like it didn't belong there, and naturally that turned into nightmares, as they do.
Yep.
So it stuck with me for a while. So I thought, if we're gonna do a monster in this book, like there's only so much you could do with a comic book to scare people, and since we're going for a younger audience, we couldn't really like rip people's heads off, which I feel like is kind of the default for horror comics, like to add in the gore, add in the like, whoa, they did it kind of moments. So I thought we got to make it as hard to look at as possible. And I mean, you've only seen issue 1, which is on the like craziness level pretty low. We're almost done with issue 2, and at some point BA was just like, I'm gonna go crazy with this, and issue 2 is already pretty wild. So I'm excited for you to see that as well. But yeah, no, it's all turned out incredibly spooky and wonderful, and they're just absolute wonderful delight to work with.
It's funny, I love how you kind of compared it to like old media, old cartoons that we watched as kids, and how that those like kind of surreal, kind of haunting moments stuck with us as kids, and kind of brought us into what our what is our creative process as adults. And something that reminded me of that while you were talking there was there's this episode of Batman the Animated Series with Clayface, where I don't know if you remember this. I think it's called like Clay Face to Face. It's one of the, or no, I'm sorry, it's called Feet of Clay. It's one of the earlier episodes of Batman the Animated Series. And this was at the time where cell animation was kind of slowly starting to make its way out. But there's this like almost anime-esque type of force behind the creation of Clayface in this series. Like, as we know, like Batman the Animated Series is this kind of like it's very like a static, has a very specific look. But then when Clayface is transforming and on screen, he looks almost like Ghost in the Shell. If you're familiar with like anime from the 90s, it all feels very like body dysmorphia and a lot of like bulging eyes and like veins and all these things. And it freaked me out in a very similar way as a kid.
Yeah. No, I think the goal is to harness the creative abilities of like those BuzzFeed lists from like 2016, where they're like top 10 episodes of children's TV where they went crazy. It's like, that's the goal. That's the goal. Is that one kind of like episode that you remember where you're like, why did they go so hard on this? Like that scared me as a kid. Like that's what the comic's about. That's the goal there.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit. So tell us a little bit about Mustn't Tell. Kind of give me and the listeners of the show kind of like the elevator pitch that you were, promoting out there for this Kickstarter.
Yes. So the elevator pitch is essentially like, what if Disney Animation did a horror movie? The goal of the whole story is to tell a story between two best friends who they are working together to essentially defeat a monster that's haunting one of their homes. If you've read any of my stuff before, that's not all that it's about. There's a lot of twists and turns, and it's going to make a lot of people cry. But that's the Disney-esque part of it, like it's one of those stories that has the face value horror plot, but we're also going to dive into a lot of emotional twists, turns. It does a lot of stuff about just like growing up in general. The whole story takes place during the main character's point in his life, where he's like in that transitional period where he's kind of too young to know how to handle things, but old enough where he's expected to know how to handle things. But also, I guess, I should probably talk more about the plot, which is just two friends. They're silly, they're fun. It takes place in the mid 2000s, like 2007ish, 2005. There's a lot of like Nintendo DS playing in it, which is a lot of fun. And yeah, it's essentially like Stranger Things taking place in the early 2000s, where they're just gonna get a baseball bat and try to kill a monster with it. So if you like jokes, if you like nostalgia for that time period, give or take, if you like the feeling of like having a play date with your friend after school, and also if you like horror stuff, you'll like this comic.
Yeah, this is like very much speaking to my era of being an adolescent for sure. I grew up in like the early 2000s, and the whole first issue is very reminiscent of what a lot of my middle school to early high school days pretty much looked like, getting together after school, playing some Game Boy, trading stories. There's even a moment in this first issue where one of their other friends who is not in the actual issue, they find out that has lied about like some secrets within a game. And everyone listening to this, all the younger people, anyone that's younger than 25, you'll never know this because you've kind of grown up with the internet, but there was a time where you just listened to what someone said on the playground and you tried to look for Mew behind the truck in Pokemon Red, even though he wasn't there. So like these things dominated the discourse as a young person.
Yeah. Luigi was somewhere in Super Mario 64. Your cousin told you he was. Yep. He heard from his friend. You got to play at like 2 a.m. You got to find 69 stars and then go to this spot and you'll find Luigi. He'll be there. You go, wahoo. But yeah, no, that was one of the first things I thought of was like, what's the essential young boy playing a video game thing, and it had to be heard it from a friend that the secret's in there, and that kind of kicked off that whole like vibe of the mid 2000s nostalgia for me. Mm-hmm. There's gonna be a lot of it still going. We have like action figure stuff that we're planning out. We got like 11 different fake video games that we've like done branding for. We're being little freaks for this one, but I'm really excited.
Nerds love that kind of specificity. They love that kind of, the collectibles. And I mean, again, we're talking about it here in the story with the two boys, how they're, that we are nothing if not just like wanting to collect all the nerd things. And I think I saw the other day, and we'll talk about how, you've already hit your limit. Like not the limit, you guys have hit the goal. Like the goal was 4,000 and you knocked that out of the park in the first, day or two?
It was the first 4 days.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a lull in like the third day, but then all of a sudden just picked up again randomly and we got it. So I was very happy.
Yeah, that's incredible. But also I think I saw that you are going to be soon possibly promoting like a trading card perhaps for the next stretch goal.
Yeah, that's the first stretch goal is we're doing 2 trading cards with the idea is that we'd have 5 by the end of the series because it's a 5-issue series. It's going to be so hard to explain without the visuals, but the trading card is... Did you have rescue heroes when you were a kid? It was like the buff toys that were like construction workers and like firefighters and police officers.
I think I remember it. Yeah, it's like you just like dug up a repressed memory of my childhood from that.
Yeah. I remember playing with them. Like I would go to the pool like when I was like 5 by myself and just sit in like the shallow end and just like pick up water with like a bucket from the construction worker and like pour it on the police officer. Anyways, so it's that the idea for those is, buff dudes that have like these like action packed jobs and like change the world. So we created a fake line of them called Everyday Heroes, where it's buff dudes who have like 9-to-5 jobs. So it's like you got your car salesman, you got an accountant, you got like a restaurant host, The thankless jobs that keep the world going.
Mm-hmm.
So from that, we obviously can't really make action figures for those. That'd be a huge task. But we're doing trading cards for them. So earlier today, and if you go to the Kickstarter page, you can see a sample of one of the cards. We did one for the used car salesman, which will be tied into issue 1. It's just basically we're gonna make a trading card with it's matched like the wonky graphic design of like a Pokemon card, but it's for some guy named Stan who sells used Honda Civics, and we added in a bunch of jokes to them, and it fits the world of it really well. And I know that people will probably want to have all 5 by the end of like the final campaign, which should be exciting. But yeah, if you like dumb jokes and you want to collect some trading cards that have just as many dumb jokes as you can fit on a 3x5 piece of cardboard, it's right up your alley.
Well, I also love to talk a little bit about, and you say here in the Kickstarter on the main page, it's B.A. Roth's little special guy, which is our main villain, our monster in this story. How much of this derives directly from your brain, and how much does it come from just Roth's creative vision?
So I would say a lot of it came from my brain. I actually did things earlier with another artist of just like getting the character design out, and then I asked BA to be on it. I'm trying to like toe the line of not spoiling, like, because this is like issue 5 stuff.
Sure.
But in the design of the monster, there is one of the goals to get of the design. I'm trying to be really careful. Was to make it look a little sickly. But when I like showed the original character designs to BA and then kind of like explained to him what the whole story was and what we were trying to go for, he just started dropping all these medical terms about like what a body does after death, and like how rigor mortis can like there's like different forms of rigor mortis and how it like positions like the body's hands and like different. It was like really dark and gross. It was kind of like the thing that you'd see like a Renaissance painter when they like tear apart a body to better understand it. Like he had that level of knowledge of death. And I was like, yeah, this is perfect. Do that. So he was able to like, obviously like his now, like the design is one thing, but like the actual movements and the actions is a whole different thing. And he's like kind of perfectly captured like what makes movements creepy. And it's kind of how you connect them to death essentially. So he's doing these unnatural but natural movements that when you look at them from this monster, like look like a dead body's moving, but like not like from a zombie movie, but from like, like almost like a strobe effect, because it's comics, you're doing panels. So he's just so smart where he's able to like have this guy moving in these different poses, but each one is kind of unnatural and creepy. He's not just like pouncing like a villain in a kid's movie. He's creaking along, which I think he's doing an amazing job at. And yeah, that's where the freak part comes into the little freak explanation, because he is this big gross monster, but also BA is just like puppeteering him in this absurd way.
Yeah, without spoiling anything, I'm curious, how much of this monster are we going to, like, how much of the backstory are we going to get during this 5-issue series?
All of it, thankfully. I would say, I mean, this is not a spoiler, this is more of a tease. At the end of issue 2, you see the monster. So the plot of issue 1 is that the boys want to hit it with a baseball bat, and they think that's going to kill it. Spoiler alert for beginning of issue 2. It doesn't work. The monster has another part of the monsters that could basically teleport, which is just tying into like childhood fears of like none of it's logical. Mm-hmm. So then the next step is just getting visual proof of it, because a big part of the mustn't tell aspect of it is it's one of those unexplained things as a kid that you can't quite say to an adult. So issue 2 is them, they find a camera. The new plan, instead of hitting it with a bat, is that they're going to get a photo of it. And in the process of getting that photo, you kind of see the monster for what it really is. Mm-hmm. And that's going to give a little bit of a background to it. Like you get a lot of the design aspects that I can't say right now that are spoiler. But then by the time issue 5 rolls around, you know exactly what's going on with it. You know exactly what the monster is and like what it represents and what the purpose of it is. There's not a lot of mystery in this story by the end of it, but there is going to be a lot of people being mad at me and some tears. I'm very excited.
That should just be the tagline at the top of your website. Tommy Stella, he'll make you cry.
That'll be the issue 5 one. Yeah. Like it just says sorry across the thing.
Well, and also kind of along with that, there's a specific scene in issue 1 that I kind of wanted to kind of pick your brain on a little bit because it reminded me of, again, as a kid. I feel like you and I are probably a similar age. I'm 32, so I think we grew up in the same era, and there's this one scene in the book where the plan is for them to basically spend the night together and attack this monster together, right? And then again, hopefully that's not a big spoiler or anything, but that's kind of like the initial plan. And Jake is like, I'm going to stay up. I'm going to help you. I'm going to be there for you. And then eventually he falls asleep. And I think we've all dealt with this where we have always been that person in a group of friends where like, we're going to be the one to stay up the latest. And then when we're the one that stays up the latest, that's when it's the scariest. And I remember very specifically, and again, I'm dating myself horribly in this moment, but I very vividly remember as a kid watching the Blair Witch out in a garage in the middle of nowhere. Like my friends lived out in the woods, kind of essentially rural Indiana. And we're in this garage and we're watching the Blair Witch and we're all kind of, I think we're all having a great time. And we're all kind of like, we're fully invested. I'm probably 10 or 11 years old at this point. And I look around me and the 3 other guys that were with me are all asleep and I'm the only one awake. And it's like, she's almost at the witch's house. And I'm like, holy crap. How am I going to fall asleep?
Yeah. Like part of the story with that, like between the friendship is there's such like a safety net in your friends just being awake. And I think that's just like, that's another part of the childhood fears is that like once you have a friend that's awake, like nothing can hurt you, even if things seem scary. So a big part of like having essentially Jake, the best friend character, is always around throughout the story simply because he is like the one safety net that he's going to get.
Yeah.
And anytime you can remove Jake from the story, that's when things get a little extra crazy, which I'm excited for because that spoiler that will happen eventually in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
A lot of the safety nets kind of get pulled out of there. And then we also do a lot of fun stuff with like what actually is scary and what's like more perception. And that's another time where like having BA doing a lot of the haunting stuff is like really fun because you can have, scenes where something is only scary to the main character, Ryan. And how we can show that is that it's a normal everyday occurrence, but like BA gets to like kind of trace over some of it and add like some rigidness and some scary lines, if you will. So there's a lot of like kind of fun things you could do with the perception of childhood fears and how they just kind of morph everything around you.
Yeah. As a kid or as a young person in general, our perception of life is so limited. We're like horses with their blinders on. Everything in front of us is the most important. It's life and death every day, no matter what. A girlfriend breaks up with you, that's the end of your life right there, right? And with this situation here between these two friends, the moment that you find out that Jake has passed out, it's almost like this is the end for Ryan. And I'm curious. I will tell everyone right now, Tommy is obviously my friend and I'm here. I want to promote this story as much as possible, but I wouldn't just outrightly say that I wasn't interested in the story if I wasn't. This is a fun book and I'm excited for you and the entire creative team that, again, as we said earlier, this has already hit its goal, but it's going to keep going. We've got, at the time of this recording and by the time that it's released to the public, everyone listening to this right now, you'll still have just over 2 weeks to go and support this book. And I think you should. And that kind of leads me into my next question for you, Tommy. How does it feel, again, after just 3 or 4 days, this thing's fully funded, you've got close to 100 backers. What is like going through your head in this moment?
It's like screaming mainly. When we set it up, we were confident that we'd get to the goal, but I thought it was going to be more of like a last minute thing. Like I was fully prepared to have a month of like sitting at like 2,500 and just being like, I hope it gets like that last day kind of bump. But just everyone that like immediately started sharing it and posting it everywhere. Like obviously the team was doing a ton of it, but like I was kind of blown away by just people who like friends, family, people on Twitter that I've never met before were just picking it up and being like, do it, like support it. And then stuff, people were doing pledges that I wasn't even expecting ever. I don't even know how they have that kind of money. Good for them. That's awesome. Yeah, it just blew me away. And then when we hit our goal, I turned 30 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, February 23rd. And last weekend I was having a party with friends from high school and college to just like, we were doing a murder mystery night. And like while we were all doing that, like the second the game ended, I checked my phone and we had hit the goal, and I was like, I hit the goal, and everyone like screamed and celebrated, and it was just like this like perfect little moment. So I was just like 10 out of 10. Like I'll always remember that weekend of like when I hit the goal surrounded by all my friends and way earlier than I thought it could ever be. Like when I checked it before then, it was like $800 away, maybe even more. And then I had checked like at the party and it was like $150 away. And I was like, oh my God. So I'm very grateful. Trying to currently plan how to keep that like momentum going for future
Yeah.
campaigns. Because issue 3, 4, and 5 are each going to be their own campaign. Issues 1 and 2 kind of worked better together, and like issue 1 is just a simple introduction. Issue 2 kind of sets the stakes of the whole thing, whereas issue 3, 4, and 5 are like their own. Issue 3 is this like it's for the English majors, is what I've been saying. Like there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of like crazy moments. It's basically the thesis for the whole story. Then issue 4 is like a giant battle essentially, and then issue 5 is the big resolution that's going to make everyone get mad at me. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so now I'm trying to figure out how to keep the momentum and that like hype from the first 2 issues for issue 3 and 4 and 5 in different campaigns, which might be a struggle, but I'm hoping to kind of get blown away again.
What's been the biggest challenge in terms of putting this book on Kickstarter and campaigning it? Like, you hear a lot of creators bringing their stories to Zoop or Kickstarter or what have you. And it always feels like it's like this very sort of strenuous process. So I'm curious, well, I guess it's like maybe a two-parter question. Number one, are you the one mainly organizing this Kickstarter campaign? And number two, if so, what's been the most challenging part about it?
I am the one mainly doing it. I feel like as this isn't the case for everyone, but I feel like as the writer, my job is kind of easy. Obviously, I have to like obsess over like the script and like creating the world and stuff. But like art is just really, really hard and it takes forever. And I am very grateful for John and BA for like spending, 6 hours on a page sometimes, probably more sometimes. Like it's insane. So my part, like I could do a script in like a week or two, depending on how many edits I do. So when it comes to like setting up the Kickstarter, even fulfilling the Kickstarter, I mean, I have a lot of experience in that, but when it comes to doing all the Kickstarter sides of things, like I was like, I'll do it and I'll do all of it. So that's kind of been the case. So while they work on the actual issue 2, I've been doing the Kickstarter stuff. And I would say as far as like the tough parts go, I would say the logistics are the hard part. Usually I'm not very good at like selling my own comics. I'm good at like selling other people's comics. I love like raving about like a friend's work or something. But when it comes to my own stuff, like even at my like local comic shop, I like brought up that I was doing a Kickstarter, and he was like, "What's it about?" And I was like, "Stuff." It's just like hard sometimes to like find the words to. I also do weird comics too, so like it's really hard to sell people on those sometimes. But that was surprisingly easy. I think just kind of like writing it down as like almost like a press release on Kickstarter was easy. But it's the logistics of just like shipping things out and the prices and the budget and all that. Like it's a lot of numbers when I like words is kind of the main issue. And then you just feel bad for international people because shipping's like $25 to $30 for them, and it's like it's not that good. I don't know why you're buying it, but I have a
Well,
lot of
thank you.
international. Yeah, exactly. Like it's not worth an extra $30. So for any international buyers, you get like a little signed postcard from everyone for free, as just like a thank you for paying the stupid shipping prices.
Sure.
But yeah, if anyone's looking to get into a Kickstarter, sign up for like stamps.com so you can like do like test shipment pricings. That's kind of the easiest way to figure out how much shipping costs at the exact moment you're doing it. And then just figure out logistics. I'm terrified of the actual fulfillment process, even though I have all planned out. But it's such a task,
Yeah. No, absolutely. That seems to be like kind of the hallmark of Kickstarter is just the amount of work that goes into it. But you're making comics, Tommy. This is incredible. Like this is
Yes.
like what this is all about. You're putting out your work, and I wanted to kind of transition a little bit to maybe your other work and just kind of like your story behind becoming a comic book writer. I've known you for a couple of years now, and I've always revered your work. I want to specifically shout out The Days. The Days is the one that I think I reread it in preparation for this conversation. And I think that is just, and this is not a damnation against anything or Mustn't Tell, but like The Days, I think is your magnum opus at this point. It is like truly, I think if you're ever in a big meeting with one of the big two or someone that you're trying to impress, you need to put The Days in their hands because it's great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that one. I had done I've done other comics before then. Like I'm in like the resume booster phase still, like I'm very much someone that uh, I'm surrounded by a lot of writers that are starting out that think that saying I want to write will be enough to like get them in the correct spots in the meetings and all that. My advice is always like create something, like make a thing. Like that's why I'm doing so many one shots. You get like a stack of them, you can just hand them to someone and be like, here's a beginning, middle, and end for you right
Yeah.
here.
A charcuterie board of my
So
work. Here you go.
exactly, yeah. Here's some Swiss
Yeah.
cheese. But I had done a few of them, and like at the time, it was like people were saying these are really good and this is fun, but like it never really felt like it was anything more than like a little kind of like a fan project. But then when I put the days out, I I remember it was at Star Wars Celebration last year in London. I was there and I did Disneyland beforehand, and I was in some like random restaurant in Disneyland eating a lasagna, which fits the story of the days, which I didn't even realize when I bought it. It just looked good. But BA had sent me the final PDF. He was like, "It's done. I'm finished." And we uploaded it to Gumroad, or I think it was, yeah, we uploaded it to Gumroad, and I was like, it's being like I had a ton of copies of like a slightly unfinished version that we had printed for Celebration in my suitcase. I brought like 100 of them
Mhm.
and just gave them out for free. But when I like hit send on the tweet to post that it was up, it got like a ton of retweets, a ton of share. Like people were replying, being like, "This is incredible, incredible," and it was like the exact like that was like the moment, like that was like the line in the sand where I was like, "Oh, like I think I could actually do this." Like it was just like I got this reaction that I finally wanted. People were, I gave them out at the Celebration in London. People were crying on the tube. They were sending me selfies of just like covered in tears on the subway car. Uh, and I was like, wow, this I could do this, I guess. So yeah, so I'm very grateful for the days. I followed it with a story called At the End, which I'm also very proud of, but it is weird
Garf.
and people are confused by Garf. Um, and yeah, no, I think the days is really something that I will always be proud of because it's just like, and there was actually have I don't think this is a video format, so I'll just show Chris on here, but I have BA's original sketch from one of the
Oh,
scenes.
amazing.
It's the ghost standing with his
Yeah.
sister. I had sent him the script, and then he was just like doodling in a park, and he sent me that, and it was the exact like it was the only time I've ever had it where like this the script that I had written was perfectly visualized. Like it was exactly what I saw, like with no notes or anything. And I was like, oh, cool, this is it. We did
Yeah.
it.
So I'm curious. I'm sure you've gotten this comp before, but A Ghost Story, the David Lowery movie from A24. Have you heard anyone kind of compare your story to that?
No, I don't even know what is it called.
It's called A Ghost Story. It's an earlier, well, not earlier. I'd say it's like a mid-range A24 film from 2017 starring Casey Affleck, where basically Casey Affleck is killed in a nearby car accident, and he basically haunts his girlfriend in their old house. And it shows it's only in like the only similarities truly are in the like the visuals and the aesthetic of the story. The stories themselves are very different, but like in A Ghost Story, basically Casey Affleck, and a ghost. It's basically just a sheet. Like think about what you think of when you think of a ghost. That's what he looks like, and he's basically just haunting this house for years and years and years, even after his girlfriend has moved on and there's other people living there, and like it even is in the far future where this farmhouse is officially like in like a metropolitan, like this like sort of like sci-fi Blade Runner type of neo noir city. Like it's just kind of a sort of a mind fuck. But it is when I saw the initial cover for the days, I thought, oh man, that kind of looks almost exactly like A Ghost Story, which is being your friend. Of course, I wanted to check it out regardless. But I love A Ghost Story. That's one of those movies that's very easy to recommend to people who want to feel something and hurt for a bit.
Yeah. I mean, like I just looked it up and it does look really good. But that was like the strength and the weakness of kind of picking like the ghost sheet costume as like the main symbol. I got a ton of like Phoebe Bridgers comparisons right from the get
Hmm.
go. And like obviously like Charlie Brown, and people were sending me during Halloween time if they'd go to the store, there'd be like little statues, like decorations of that symbol, like the ghost kid. And it was definitely like a one of those moments where I knew that if I was gonna do a character that was that universal, I would have to do something with it to make it, unique.
Sure.
And I think what could have been a weakness, thankfully, I hope I turned into a strength by giving it like a ton of character around it. So it wasn't necessarily about, the aesthetic of the ghost. It was more about like the craziness that was happening around it. But yeah, so I mean, it's been a lot of fun, and I can definitely do some easy merch if I just go to like a store in Halloween time and just quickly buy up some of those ghost statues.
Yeah, I got a pretty cool pen at New York last year of the days.
Oh yeah,
You gave
yeah.
out some pens there, I think, at that convention, and I had one. So yeah, I agree. It is like a very like visually sort of I'm not using the right word here, but like visually stunning. When you see it, you automatically are like, what is this? Like, what is this little kid with his sneakers and his, his ghost sheet on? What is this story?
You know, there's definitely a lot of symbols that have like a nostalgia, even if you can't really associate it with something.
Sure.
And I feel like just the ghost costume is just like childhood, kind of spooky, or like was that like fall time? And yeah, I think it worked out really
Yeah.
well.
Well, Tommy, I have one final question for you here, and I appreciate you so much for being on here to talk about Must Tell, your career thus far, all the things. You know, I'm going to be following you all the way, and being one of your bigger cheerleaders. But I'm curious, just kind of like as a final question. That way, again, and we talked about this a little bit before the recording, but that way, when you're, when you've already occurred more Eisner wins than you already have, which is in the 40s or 50s, if I'm
Oh yeah,
understanding it correctly.
the shelf just fell again. I have it under some it's over soundproof foam, so it just falls under the
Yeah.
foam, no noise, but it just fell several times.
But I'm
So
curious,
heavy.
5 years from now, as a writer, what are you wanting to do? Do you find right now 2024 Tommy Stella to be someone who is like really wanting to tell their own stories and be someone who is very creator own driven and all these things? Or do you find yourself maybe wanting to play at the big two down the road, or maybe possibly at a smaller publisher like a Dark Horse or a Boom Studios or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, I think as everyone usually starts with, they want to do a Spider-Man, they want to do Star Wars or something like that. They want to do Avengers. But like the more I've done my own stuff, the more I've like kind of established that if I never get to those, I'll be fine.
Hmm.
I think as long as the stories that really mean a lot to me land in the way that they've been landing, but for more and more and more and more, I'll be super happy with that. Um, but also, I wouldn't say no to doing those. Basically, like I'm still a huge fan of them. I think ideally, where my brain kind of thrives is on like short form kind of stories. So like I would love to do mini series for certain characters that are like 6 issues max. Like I really like my brain needs to go into something knowing what the ending
Hmm.
is, or else I don't really want to write it. So an ongoing thing might be a little bit tougher for me. I like when I can like change things a little bit more, like so certain characters you can do whatever the heck you want with them, and then there are obviously other ones where you can't really adjust them too much, and you wouldn't really want to in that kind of way.
Hmm.
So yeah, so ideally, down the line, I'd be doing a lot of my own stuff, and it would still be landing, and people are still like, "Hey, I'm crying, and I hate you for this." Perfect. And also, yeah, I would love to do like shorter stuff for the big two, and really any indie publisher. I just think comics are the best thing ever. Um, I definitely have a bit of a pet peeve these days of comics that feel like they're created just to eventually become a movie, and that's like their main purpose.
Hmm.
Whereas I love what comics can do, and if something's adapted later on, that's cool, that's awesome. But like, make a comic for comics sakes, and that's kind of my whole vibe right now. Is I want to like keep making these incredible pieces of art, and hopefully people read them. And if they don't, I'm happy that I got to do a thing. That's a perk of being a writer, is that like even if like nothing really happens out of it, you still get this really cool thing that you didn't have to draw, but it's like from your brain, and now you can hold it, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll always be grateful. I think that's where I'm hoping to be 5 years from now, is just excited to be there still.
Yeah.
That's the perk. That's the pro.
Yeah, that's a good way to approach it because, 5 years from now, it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're telling good stories, right? And that's really truly what matters. And again, like I said, I'm just, as your friend, I'm very proud of you, and as your fan, I'm going to continue to follow you. So, Tommy, once again, I want to thank you for coming on to the Oblivion Bar podcast. Once again, everybody listening to this right now, check out the show notes. All of Tommy's links, including the Mustn't Tell Kickstarter, will be in the show notes. So that way, if our conversation has encouraged you and motivated you to want to support this story, and we hope that it did, go check it out in the show notes. Tommy, I'm going to pass the baton off to you one more time. Is there anything you want to plug or say or anything before we head out of here today?
I think we covered just about everything. Definitely check out the Kickstarter. If you can follow John and BA on like Twitter or Blue Sky, I'd really appreciate that. I tend to hog a lot of the spotlight, and I don't like doing that, so I want to make sure that they also are getting attention. They're incredible. They're insanely talented. They post a lot of random fan art as well, so it's not just must and tell repeats and all that. They're the best, and I love them. They're the best. Go follow them. Then yeah, as far as the Kickstarter goes, any pledging is appreciated. It's a very good gift for anyone that you might want to get into comics. I should have honestly been pitching this a lot more, but it serves as a really good jump-in point for comics. It's gonna be 5 issues. The story is straightforward, but has a lot of like emotional twists and turns, but nothing like complicated. Obviously, you don't need to know a backstory to jump into it. I think it's gonna be one of those kind of stories that if you give it to a kid who's 13, in a few years they'll probably try to reread it over and over again just to like relive that moment again. It's one of those kind of stories. And yeah, I appreciate any support you can throw our way.
Mm-hmm. And how can people follow you on the socials?
My main one is unfortunately Twitter, just because that's where my biggest following is, and I can't quit it. That one's Tommy_Stella. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok. I think the Instagram is Tommy_Stella, because that other one was taken already by my arch nemesis. But then I think TikTok might be Tommy Stella with no underscores. So just have fun. You'll figure it out.
You'll find it.
Get out there. Go find it. It's all complicated.
That's right. Well, once again, Tommy, thank you so much. I hope to have you on in the future, talk about Must and Tell or whatever you're working on in the future. And again, if nothing else, I'll definitely see you at a convention here in 2024 at some point.
Yeah, you will. Thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it.